Um, at this time, we'll introduce to you Don Roth, who's going to be speaking to us about Job. Um, right now, I just anyways.
Thank you, Don.
Mhm.
Um, the book of Job was kind of interesting to me because it to me it seems to be misplaced, to say the least. But that doesn't mean that for the scholars that they think that Job is placed in the proper area because it is not necessarily a something that has a the idea of poetry as we think of it, where you have rhymes. The book of Job is where it's been placed where it is because it's a matter of ideas that are being presented in the book of Job. You might find it be rather interesting as we start through this book to understand some of the things that you may have read over in the past and not realized the significance. And so this is what one of the things that we're going to be taking a look um, at tonight. Now, I've read some introductions to this book, and there's a kind of a controversy between who wrote the book, Moses or Solomon. And to me, it's pretty clear it actually was Moses who recorded the book of Job. But when we realize that the actual writer of the book, of course, is God. This is quite clear, will be quite clear as we take a look at these situations. Now, the this book, I hope that bell didn't mean something. uh, this book of Job is actually has a reference back to the Old Testament. And so that's the first place that I would like to go this evening so that we get some reference to the actual positioning of this book of Job. And if we go to Genesis, the book of Genesis, and we should find it in 47, chapter 47 of Genesis. Uh, I take that back. We really are going to start in Genesis chapter 46. And we're just going to pick up and read one verse, and that is uh, verse 13 of 46, Genesis 46. And it says, the sons of Judah are Onan, Shelah, Perez, Zerah, but Erah and Onan died in the land of Canaan. So the sons of Perez were Herzon and Hamuel. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Puvah, and Job, and Shimron. So here we find that this is where actually Job finds his start. And it's back way back in the book of Genesis. And so when we're going to look at this in a historic reference, we need to recognize that this man, Job, was an extremely powerful man. And historically, you might think of this in the area of when the Hittites and the uh, uh, I forgot the name of the other group of individuals, but that's at this time when they were more or less in the rule of the areas. And so they were the power brokers of the time. And so if we recognize and put this into perspective, this means that Job and everything that happened to him took place probably I need to get back to, oh, there we are. The book of Job. It was 600 years after the flood, approximately. And so when we're looking at this idea of Job, we have to think in terms of this. This is the way historically we would find the book of Job. Now, when we consider, let's start reading in the very first chapter of Job. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. So when you think about this, if you didn't read what we just did already, understanding that Job was related to the sons of Jacob. And so when you're thinking about this, it makes sense, because how could this man have understood what God, when God looks at him, could understand what God is looking for in an individual? This is should be really pretty plain to us, and we should be able to recognize that. So continuing on in verse 2, and 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Also, in his possession were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. And so this was, you could consider this a time when an individual like this could become this powerful. Now, when it's looking at it, we're looking really at his wealth. We're not looking at, well, did he have an army, or how did he manage to keep everything under control? This isn't the point. So we're going to find out why and how this man actually achieved this. Now, verse 4, and the sons would go to feast in their homes, each of on his appointed day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters and eat and drink with them. So it was, when the days of feasting had run its course, that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. This verse right here I consider extremely important, because for several reasons. First of all, when you're thinking about Job, he's taking on the job. If you think about this, he's taking on the job of God, isn't he? It's clear that he's thinking that he can sacrifice for his sons to take away their sins. By his actions, he is taking away the sins of his sons. And of course, daughters should be included in that. So this is this is really an interesting little statement here. And in addition to that, you notice that what it says here, he says, it may be my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. We don't really realize this until basically until you get into the New Testament, where God makes it plain in Matthew that it's what not only our actions, but it's our thinking, that we can sin very easily in our thinking. You know, what's the difference? If you curse a man and, no, I wish he was dead. Well, okay, what have you committed? You've committed murder. So once we recognize this, and this is really an important little point here. So continuing on, it says, now then, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Now, this is an interesting point here that's being recorded. Obviously, one of the beliefs by the scholars is, well, the reason that Moses would have found out about this person Job, because when he fled Egypt after he killed the Egyptian, he fled to an area that was where this Job was located. And so they say, well, see, he heard the story of Job there, and so that's why he's the recorder of the book of Job. Well, there's a lot of information here that a story about an individual would not be included in the story. Right away, this statement about God coming together with Satan and his sons is obviously something that would not be part of a story that's relating information about an individual that lived in this area. So as we look at that, we come to the next question that we should or would have in a way in our mind is, well, is this God the Father, or is this Jesus Christ? Which one is it? How do we know? There is in John 15, there's an important statement in John 15. And in John 15, verse, I suppose we should go there, right? John 15, and Christ is talking. You got remember that this is before his crucifixion. What's being said here is before his crucifixion. I believe that what we refer to as the Old Testament runs from Genesis up until the sacrifice of Christ. All of this information that we see in prior to this really could be attached to the Old Testament as part of the Old Testament. It wasn't until the crucifixion of Christ, when the veil was torn and revealed the Holy of Holies, that we have a change in a real basic change in the understanding. Sacrificial animals, all of that becomes a thing of the past. It's part of the Old Testament. It's no longer necessary. And so as we pick this up in John 15, verse 1, I am the vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Now, the vine, Christ says he's the vine. He's pointing out plainly what his job is. The job is to feed, right? That's what the vine does. It feeds the rest of the branches. And then as we continue on, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Now, that's another interesting little statement there. Every branch in me. In other words, it's only the branches that are connected to the vine that we're going to find out how the Father operates on it. This is it's a different way maybe of looking at things instead of if we look at it in this way. And so and he says every branch in me that does not bear fruit he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit he prunes that it may bear more fruit. So it's taking, who is making this decision? He's making a decision about us, really. If you want to carry this through, he's deciding, well, this person I'm going to work with. He needs some trimming. He's okay, but he needs trimming because I want him to produce more than what he has been producing. This is when you start turning this inwardly, it really makes one feel rather inadequate. But this is an extremely important statement, because who is deciding to cut the branch off? The Father. He's the one who's making these decisions. Who is deciding how or what to do to the individual to bring out the best in the individual? This is what he's talking about. So it can produce more fruit, right? So you can see the importance of this statement here. So now we can go back, once again, we can go back to the book of Job now that we recognize this. And so when we're looking at this, let's wait a minute. My marker came out of here. So let me put that in there so I can go back to the book of Job once again when we're looking at this. So now when we get to verse 7, it says, the Lord said to Satan first of all, in verse 6, we want to determine who is it that has in effect, called this meeting. And you might say called this meeting. He's got all his sons, and Satan comes along to the meeting also, which shows something rather important, that Satan is free to interact with the angels and with God. He's free to do that. It's very plain here. God did not call Satan and say, well, we're having a meeting, Satan, you better be here. He didn't. Satan decided to come to the meeting on his own. This is the conclusion that we should be drawing from these verses. And the Lord said to Satan, continue on in verse 7, and the Lord said to Satan, from where did you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth in it. It gets a really smart alecky answer, In other words, he's not really telling God anything, is he? And well, I was down on the earth and this is what I did. I traveled around, and so Basically, that's what he's telling God. And so then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil. So here's the description to Satan, right? And we understand. Now there's some important things coming up here that maybe we have not considered. And so, Satan answered him and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Well, in other words, he God is, for Job, God is the sugar daddy, and he gives us everything, that we want, right? And he makes life just great for us. He blesses us. And so this is the accusation that Satan is making. And so verse 10, you have made a hedge around him and his household, around all that he has on every side. You have blessed the work of his hands. You have, and his possessions have increased in the land. And personally, when I ask, thank God for keeping Satan out of my life. I don't need to battle with him. So continue on. And of course, he says, you've made a hedge around him, and you've blessed him and the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. And then verse 11, this is an interesting little verse. Now, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now, this is a point that I think we need to recognize. In fact, Satan has no power. He can't cause a storm. He can't cause an earthquake. He can't cause a flood. He can't do any of those things. I say that, and it looks like, well, he sure is doing this. Well, let's read a little bit further. Now, when the well, we don't have to read any further, actually. All we have to do is realize an important factor here. If Satan had the power to do any of these things that I've just mentioned, then he would be out of control of God. So therefore, Satan has no physical power to do anything on this earth. That's a pretty strong statement. But when you consider the situation, who is running this world? Who created this world? Who created the people in this world? God. For what purpose? To develop character within the individual. And so if this is his purpose, he can't allow someone else to do willy-nilly whatever he likes to do to really upset his plan. It's not possible. Satan has, therefore, you can understand this, that Satan has no physical power whatsoever. He has one power, the power of the air. That's the only power that he has. Let me see. I had it written down and now I don't see it. Okay, but it is in the Ephesians 2:2. There it is. And my eyes are less than great. um, verse 1, it says, now he made you alive who were dead to trespasses and sins in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. So who is he? He's the prince of the power of the air. Well, exactly what does that mean? Among whom also we all willingly once conducted ourselves in the lusts of the flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh, of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others. So when we're looking at that, we should understand that Satan, he has one power, and that is he can deal in with your mind. In other words, he can put thoughts and desires into your mind, or taking existing desires and bringing them up so that they become a really important desire. And this is the heart of Satan's power. This is where it all lies. And it's very simple. You think about going back to the book of Genesis. What did he do? He convinced Adam and Eve that this God that had created them was not there for their good, but was there to for his good, or basically he was just saying that, look, God is lying to you, I'm telling you the truth. And so he was able to convince them. He could do nothing to them. Physically, he could do nothing to them, but he could convince them, and they bought into his system. In fact, this whole world is operating under Satan's system. That is the idea that you are here fighting for your existence. Think about this. This is from the very beginning. This is exactly what happened. Families fought with other families. Individuals fought with, well, Cain and Abel. Abel was taking over his position, and he didn't like it. And so what did he do? He killed him. Who planted that information into his mind? Well, Satan. He worked to cause him to kill his brother. So as we look at these as these stories, or these things that took place in the past, we can understand exactly what Satan is using against human beings. And so therefore, it's always the desire to gain or desire to protect oneself. And whether it's individuals or whether it's nations fighting with nations. It's very all that we have a history of nearly 6,000 years, or a little more than, actually a little bit more than 6,000 years. We have a history of mankind. This is the only thing this is what mankind's whole existence have been about, is wars and rumors of wars, and that's what it is. So when we're looking at this, I want to assure you that Satan can do nothing to you. He has no physical power to do anything. Now, as a result of maybe what other people do, you have no control over that, do you? And so therefore, you have no control over that. And so, well, of course, we have no control over the weather, etc. These things are out of our control. But when we look at this now, and when we see this, now, picking it up back in Job again in verse 13, now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking and in their older brother's house. And these children were taking advantage of all the wealth of their father. I can see that. And the messenger came to Job and said, oxen were plowing, were plowing, and the donkeys being beside them, when the Sabaeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. Made sure one got there to tell Job what was taking place. So while he was still speaking, another one came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshipped, and he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. There the Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job sinned not, did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. So this is a really interesting part in the case of Job. You would have to say that if all of these things happen to you, you might be tempted to blame God for your misfortune. Now, when I look at when things may not be going just right for me, I look at that and I realize that maybe it's what I'm doing that puts me in this position. It puts me in a position where God is not going to bless you. He's not going to make things work out for you. I've gone through in my time on this earth, I have gone through some unpleasant, let me put it, as I look back now, of course, on these situations. I look at them and I think, these are nothing compared to what Job went through. I mean, this was devastating to him. And of course, when we're going through difficulties, we look at, well, boy, these are really important to us. But maybe if we would take a little bit a different look at things and think, well, first of all, what have I been doing, or what did I do that may have caused me that I would be in this position? That's, this is fundamentally the first thing. In other words, when something goes wrong for me, this is I look right away. I don't look to someone else. I look to myself. I said, what have I been doing that the situation has arisen? That has put me in this position. What have I done? And this is the first place that you need to examine what is going on. Now, you may be the result of what someone else did, but because of your connection, you may suffer a little bit because of it. And so that's another thing. But the very first thing to think about is, what have I done? Have I been really honest with the people that I'm dealing with? Have I been upright with them? Or am I maybe trimmed the corners a little bit on the profit here? Or maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I didn't put in the kind of work day or week or month that I should have been doing, and I kind of, waxed off. I didn't carry my load that I should have been carrying. And so this is the very first place that we need to examine. We need to examine the self. And then if we look at this, the situation here with Job, we have to recognize that Christ, the Father, was looking at Job, and even though the people, and even though Satan actually, when you notice, he didn't have any real specifics to charge Job with. He didn't say, well, look at what he did with his neighbor there. He encroached on his property. Well, you see, he didn't say that. He didn't make actually, he made no accusations against Job, other than the fact that, well, he just knows where his bread and butter is where, which side of his bread is buttered. So, in other words, he was doing it and because of this. And so, actually, here God is really demonstrating. He's demonstrating to Satan. He says, "Well, okay, Satan, and I'm going to take care of everything that he has. I'm going to take his children from him, all of his home, everything. I'm taking it all." And if Satan was there, you could see he would have been pretty downcast about this time. And this is the way that we should be thinking about how our actions. We want to put Satan in the worst position. We want to make him out to be the one who is really the false person, not us. And so this is a good story of self-examination. Now, in spite of Job losing everything, all the physical things, he still did not, as I read, did not curse God. The other thing is that I want to go back again and reiterate the fact that, see, Satan couldn't do anything to Job, as we've read, really. He couldn't. And so what he had to do was convince God to do something. Now, God did do something, but not because of what Satan was saying. God was looking at Job in a different way. And you see, that's why I went back to John 15. Here we are. We're in this situation where God is working with this individual, Job. And he's working to trim him up. Now, trimming, if you've ever worked with trees and vines and things like this, when you cut the branches off, the sucker branches, when you cut those off, you'll notice a little sap comes out, a little blood in effect. It's not pleasant in that respect for the plant. And the same thing is true for us when we're put in a situation where we're corrected, or where we're put through a process of coming to realize something that is missing in our character, something that we have to bring under control. And I can remember when I first came into the church, or not the church. That is a bad word. We should not be, when we're talking about the brethren. Now, if you're talking about the Catholics, you can say the Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church. But when you're talking about the brethren, they're the called of God. They're not a church. It's not a church. It's not an organization that's out there organized for what purpose? To make money. Basically, every religious organization, every church out there is out there to make money. So when you look at that, there will be a lot of, oh, I'm not here to make money. Well, are you obtaining your living from it? Well, then you're making money. And so basically, we should never look at ourselves as being in a church. We're not in a church. We're part of the called of God. That's what we are. And so we should always keep this in mind when we're talking about the brethren. So when I first came into the truth, my language was foul. I had put 2 years in the armed service in the army, and it's not a place where people speak the King's English, so to speak. It's just the way it is, and of course, the natural vocabulary of everyone is to swear, cursing and this and that, and that. And so this was the first thing that I realized that I had to overcome. I had to stop doing it. It wasn't easy. In respect, now that I look back, I thought, well, everything should be that easy. But and it's everything that we run across that we have to change is something that we just have to work at it. That's all there is to it. You can't change overnight, so you have to work at it. Learning to keep the Sabbath and learning to keep the holy days and learning what all those holy days mean, that all took effort. It just wasn't plunked down on a platter for you. You had to work at it and overcome, telling lies. That's probably the easiest thing there is, get caught in an embarrassing situation. Well, I didn't do that. Yeah, I did. Anyway, this is what we're looking at. And I wanted to make sure that we had understood. Now, it sounds like when we're reading this, it sounds like Satan went ahead and did this. No, God, God was the one who did it. He's the only one that had the power to do the things that you saw here that we read. Not Satan. He cannot do anything to you or to anyone else as far as that is concerned. He can cause men. I mean, we just went through the Second World War. I happened to be watching some of the old videos on it, and he caused these people to take revenge, or whatever you want to, not call it revenge, but to use them as an example. The Jewish people in not just the Jewish people, but a lot of other ones were killed as a result of not the actual action of Satan, but getting men to do his will. So it should be really comforting for us to understand that. And this is, if there is a major point that I want to bring out in tonight's study of Job, it's the fact that Satan has no physical power. Now, you pick up, we're gonna come to realize something. Again, you'll pick it up in chapter 2. And again, there was a day when the sons of God came present themselves to the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said, Satan, from where did you come? And Satan answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth, from walking back and forth in it. Again, he's not revealing anything. Even though God probably knew exactly what he was doing, what he was up to. And the only thing that he was up to was causing men to fight other men, kill other men, lie to other men, steal from other men. See, all of these things are the result of Satan's use of the desires, the natural desires that we have in our body. This is another really important point that I think is important for us to understand, that we have 5 senses. That's all. Hear, see, smell, feel, etc. Okay? That's all we have. And everything that you learn, everything, well, this AI thing comes out of those 5 senses. It can come from no other. That's it. And a brain, the 5 senses, and a brain to store the knowledge. That's the other little detail that's important for us to understand. So AI is not it's just part of what man has gone through in the past. And so they make predictions, etc., and give you knowledge of understanding only based on that's all, because you cannot understand anything beyond those 5 senses. It's impossible. Just think about it. You can't do it. And so this is, all of these factors are baked into the understanding about Satan and what he can and he can't do. He can work on those 5 senses through the mind, but he cannot physically do any harm to you. So let's continue on. And again, and so the Lord said, oh, he asked him, from where did you come? Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, blameless and upright man, who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity? See, this is a key right here again. Although you enticed me, see, again, what God is saying to Satan, you enticed me. In other words, Satan didn't do those things. He said, see, you enticed me. Let me see. I lost my place. Although you enticed me against him to destroy him without a cause. This is what, see, Satan is looking at this, and you can imagine, he's really wondering why God really allowed these things to happen to Satan. I mean, to Job. Satan is looking there and says, oh, wonder why God did this. And continuing on, so Satan answered the Lord and said to him, skin for skin, yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful blisters from his sole of his foot to the crown of his head. So it sounds like he was able to do this, right? He was able to infect him. Well, he could only do it because God allowed him to do it. He couldn't do it on his own. See, it takes God to allow him to do it. So if we bring this down to a kind of conclusion is that when things are not going so well for us and we're running into unforeseen, problems or things, then there's a reason for this. And it's difficult. It's something we look at a person and we say, boy, that person is really good. Yet look at he's got this disease of this whatever. And so you're thinking, well, what's the purpose? The thing is that if you read through Job, you'll see that he's tested right to the death. I mean, he's put through all kinds of things that we're not gonna go through, but you can go ahead and read the book with this understanding and come to realize that he's tested right to the death. And sometimes God tests us right to the death. We don't know why. We have, we have no understanding of this. We haven't got the ability to see what God sees in bringing us into the kingdom. So if we keep this in mind and we go through the book, you can go through finish going through the book of Job, you'll find you'll be able to see this development. You'll see the development of Job. And of course, this is exactly what God the Father is doing. And so the final understanding, of course, is that you've been called out of this world. God has taken a personal interest in you. And the God that made the entire universe, that has given you life, has taken a personal interest in you and me. And so when we are working through, puzzling through these problems and everyday situations, this is something that if you remember, and it's not easy to remember, but it's an important thing to remember. Look, I've got the creator of the universe working with me, developing me, bringing me to a point where I'm going to enter eternal life. Don, I guess you can open up the airways to anyone who wants to make a comment or point.
Okay, I think everybody here is familiar with the protocol of raise your hand, wait to be addressed. Please keep all the comments on topic and keep your comments within reasonable length, 2 minutes or so. So any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments? Alan.
Hi, Don. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing this book to us. It's such a complex book with so many things to learn. It would take so long to go through the entirety of the book, but I'm glad you went through the introduction, first couple chapters here. Um, I have a question that occurred to me while you were speaking today. When it refers to the sons of God, how did we immediately jump to the idea that it was angelic and not the sons of God who walked as human beings, and that Satan could also show up because Satan says he walked to and fro on the face of the earth. So why do we think that the term sons of God, which, by the way, in the Geneva Bible, it says children of God. Why do we think that those are angels automatically? I don't remember why. I know there's a reason, but I don't
Well,
remember why.
first of all, it says, where were you? And obviously there are two different areas. They're not, if this meeting was taking on the place on the earth, then why would Satan say what he said? So, in other words, he came from where? Walking to and from on the earth. He came from, so this must be a different area, right?
Well, it
That's,
says that the sons of God came to present themselves.
yes.
When do human beings come and present themselves, and when do angels present themselves
Well,
typically in Scripture?
we have to recognize that man has not basically become spirit beings yet. I mean, this may be historical, but we still haven't gotten to the point of the resurrection, have we? So therefore, the only ones that we could look at here would be this. Now, there's a companion scripture in the latter part of uh, first uh, not First Samuel, First Kings, where you find the same situation where this. I'm trying to get there. Oops, wait a minute, I passed it. uh, uh, yeah, Micaiah warns Ahab, right? And
Yeah.
so what does he warn him about? He tells him about the meeting that he was at with uh, uh, oh, let me see. Okay. And the Lord said, okay. And Micaiah said, therefore, hear what the Lord, 19, hear what the word of the Lord said, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heavens standing by him on his right hand and on his left hand. And the Lord said, who will persuade Ahab to go up that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, another spoke in that manner. Then a spirit came forward. Okay. Now, why was it the definition of different? Well, that would have been a fallen angel. And so therefore we can see here there's a meeting taking place. And it's a parallel in a way to the meeting that we find in Job. And so you would have to understand of course, the other thing is that we're talking about God the Father. So this is another, I think, an important understanding in understanding what is taking place here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering why it doesn't say the angelic host came.
Well,
for him. It says this word sons of God, which is a little more like humans, not angels. You know what I mean?
I can understand that, but actually Satan obviously is a spirit being, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so he's meeting with other spirit beings up there, right?
That
So
was
this
always our
be a
assumption.
physical.
Yes.
I don't know. Are you saying this is a physical meeting or
I'm saying I'm curious. I'm saying I don't really know if I actually
okay.
believe what the former teaching was, because the word sons of God, if you look at the word sons, it actually means in the human form.
Um,
The definition of the
Actually,
Hebrew
the
word.
angels are referred to as sons of God.
Yes,
I've
that's a
been,
claim also.
yeah.
And then it says Adam in the genealogies, it goes back to Adam and it says, and Adam, the son of God.
Yeah.
So we see this term, son of God, referred to also in the human form. I'm just asking the question, why did we always leap to the idea that it was angels? And
Well, I don't think in this case, it's leaping because you can see that Satan is involved in this, and he's saying, where was he? He was down on the earth walking to and fro. So if they were on the earth, he wouldn't say, I've come from the earth. This is basically what he's saying, isn't he?
yeah, and the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come?
Yeah, see, he's coming from where?
Okay, I
He's
see the
coming from,
logic.
yeah,
I see the logic there. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Tagore?
Thanks, Don, for the message and preparations. And when we come to your age, probably we won't make it. Your generation is making it to 90s. We are probably would be done much earlier.
Uh,
Other than that, like I'm going through, as you walked us through Book of Job, Satan replies to God that he was going up and down and going to and fro and on earth. And uh, other translations also use similar phraseology that he's going up and down or roving around the earth. Do you think we can believe what he said?
well, he's saying something so vague. How are you going to pin him down? In other words, he didn't say exactly where. He just said, well, this is what I've been doing, that's all. He isn't really telling us a whole lot. He's putting himself in a position where, what are you going to say? what are you going to claim that he was doing? I'm this innocent person. I just been marching around the earth, and that's all. I haven't been doing anything causing problems for man. Could it be?
Yeah. And also the sons of God presented themselves, and the Satan adversary also came in. I checked Septuagint, it says angels of God, angeloi to Theo. So they also came, and along with them, the adversary, Diabolos, also came and presented himself. So that's interesting
Yeah.
thing between Septuagint and Masorite. And where do you place Job? Like, is it end of Genesis chronologically, where the patriarchs are
Chronologically,
there? Yeah,
uh, he is before Moses.
obvious.
Moses
Yes, yes.
Moses would be the great 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 grandson of Jacob. And so he is placing the time that I'm looking at is Joseph is going to Egypt, right? And who comes along with him? All of Jacob's sons and Jacob, right? The whole crew comes.
All
At that
70.
point, see,
Mhm.
at that point, the son of Issachar um, maybe deviates from there, or during that time period. See, people think that, when they read that, they make the mistake of reading in Genesis 400 years, and they think that Israel was in slavery for 400 years. If you do the time element that's involved, 125 years, or it's something like that, that they were under slavery in Egypt. That's all. They weren't under slavery for 400 years. And so you have this time element in there when Egypt, the part of the answer to the question is the fact that the Pharaoh was going to use, or did use, Israel uh, and his sons to as a buffer against invading armies coming into Egypt. They were there as a buffer in the land of Goshen, and so this is another little aspect of what was taking place. Why the Pharaoh was really happy to have these people come there and fill that empty. See, that would have been empty land out there, the land of Goshen, right? And so they now inhabited, they were a buffer against invading armies coming against Egypt. And so it wasn't this that he was so gregarious that he's going to give all this land. He had a reason for doing it, I believe.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when we read the book of Job, we think that these events took immediately after one another. But between first and second chapter, we almost see the second time
Right.
these sons of God presented themselves. So do you see a significant space of time?
Uh, I'm not prepared to answer that. But
Okay.
that's a leaky answer, isn't it? uh, how often does he do this? I mean, uh, maybe it's a constant thing. It could be as much as a constant thing where he's dealing and he's sending, well, you go out and you do this, or you accomplish this. Obviously, when we get to Revelation chapter 12, we find that Satan is cast out of heaven, and so it becomes a permanent. His residence is permanently the earth.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I believe, now that you put me in the situation to think about it, I hadn't really thought about this, but maybe he has this is a constant situation that he has with his people, with his angels, where he's watching everything that's going on down here in the earth, and he's picking out people to deal with, like he picked Job out to deal with Job. He picked you, he picked me, he picked Don. I mean, he picked us out to deal with us when there's billions of people out there on this earth walking, and doing things. And yet his concentration is not really with those. He's working with us individually. This is a fantastic understanding for us that we have the Father personally involved in what we're doing and how we're doing it, and that he's taking the time to trim us up.
Okay, my last question before I go, were you able
Yeah.
to map on your calendar these two events? First time sons of God present themselves, and the second time.
No.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay. I just, as far as putting things into the timeline, it has to, in order for me to be able to do that, it has to spell out something. Now, for instance, when we talked about Adam having his in Genesis 5. I should go there because I can read it a little better. We'd like to think that we have this great memory, but when it really comes time, I find I'm failing. And Adam lived 130 years, and he begat a son in his own likeness. Now, you see, I have a time element. The time element is he lived 130 years. So I can put that time element in. So his son was born when Adam was 131 years old. See, we assume that he was born when Adam was 130. That is not what it's saying. It's saying that he was already 130 years old when he had his son Seth, right? See,
Yes.
it's a careful reading of the scripture. If you do not carefully read what it says, you can make a mistake very easily. When it goes through the listing of all these patriarchs, he doesn't tell us. In other words, we don't have a definitive time. It sounds like we do, but in reality, we don't, because he doesn't tell us. He just says he lived so many years. And then he had the next offspring. Well, did he have that offspring at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year? So then that person then would have lived a different number, a different set of years from the first one, you see? And so when you go through this, you cannot, and this is one of the things that people have done, the scholars, they've taken these time elements, and they put them in, and they said, oh, the flood occurred in 1675 or whatever. When you add up these, it comes to a certain number. I think it was 16. I could look it up, but it's not worth looking up. In other words, they tell you this is the number of years. And so they just take that and say, well, the flood occurred at the end of those years. No. If you do that, you would find that Methuselah would have been swimming for a year, because in reality, he lived beyond that number. When you add him up, he lived at least a year in length. And so, therefore, you can't determine the flood by that piece of information. You can determine when the flood, I can tell you the exact year that the flood occurred, because when you add up the days of the flood, you would come with 385 days. And what is a 385 days? That is a 13-month year. And so the flood was a 13-month year. Not just a 13-month year, but a 13-month year at the maximum number of days in a 13-month year, 385. That's the maximum number of days. So by knowing this, now you have a peg that you can put in the ground and work from. You've got an absolute number. Now, but you only have that one absolute number. That's why I can tell you that 1661 was the year of the flood. That was the year. It couldn't be, well, it could be if you want to skip some information in here, you can throw, well, I won't take this, I won't use that, I'll use something else. But this is right from the Bible. I mean, this is what's in there. And so I can't put a date on something that where the date isn't in the scripture. It's quite clear, and in my timeline that I have, that you can go and download it from biblicalcalendarproof.com. You can download that calendar. You can download the timeline, and you will see in the timeline. By the way, the timeline is not a fixed piece of information, because as I'm reading and studying, I come across other dates. Oh, I'll have to add this to the timeline. I didn't realize that this was in here, so I have to add it. So the timeline is not like the calendar. The calendar is a fixed calendar. It's what it is what it is. But the timeline is something else. That changes. And sometimes I find, well, I made a mistake. Oh, we got to change that. This is what it is when you're working with something like this. It's now the calendar, in fact, is I'm putting up a challenge to everyone. I mean, not to people in the church or whatever, but the challenge is $20,000 if you can prove that there's a mistake in the calendar based on the King James version of the Bible. Now, this is, there's other little details that are part of this challenge, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm saying this is it. This is correct. You can count on it, and if you can find a mistake in it, not a typo, but an error in the way it's laid out, then you get $20,000. And so it's not this is not an idle. In other words, it's not an idle threat or boast or whatever you want to call it. It's what I believe.
Gloria?
Thank you. Thanks, Don. I appreciate starting the book of Job. I was wondering what your to the book of Job's I think it's a fascinating book, obviously, and I've centered in more on Elihu, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on Elihu's role in the book of Job.
Yeah, I haven't really thought that deeply about it, that individual, but he does stand out. There's no question about it. And now that you brought it up, I think I'll spend a little more time thinking about that and seeing if I can understand where he comes into the story. I can't tell you now. I don't know. I can't do it. I haven't. I just haven't mulled it over in my mind. That's a lot of things I've mulled over in my mind in 90 years, but that's one thing I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Alan?
Yeah, Gloria, I'll try to answer your question. Elihu was the young man who held back his comments while the other three friends continued to go on and on and on, saying things that were not right.
Yeah.
So Elihu enters the picture as the younger man, and he says, "My belly's full of it. I can't take it anymore. I've listened to all of you, and I'm done listening to you. I'm going to burst open if I don't say my piece," is the way
Right.
chapter 32 presents it. Elihu goes from all of chapter 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37. There's 6 full chapters of Elihu. And at the end of the story, when God corrects Job's 3 friends, he does not correct Elihu.
No.
Which is to say that what Elihu gave in his opinion of the matter was good information. So why Elihu? When the 3 men were done, I surmise, although I can't prove it, but it seems to me he's in the sequence right before God talks to Job in chapter 38.
All right.
So Job's friends are completely off, accusatory. They have a perspective that does really not
They're
honor
looking, the 3 friends are looking for a flaw that they can't find, so they just throw out anything.
That's right. And Elihu said, "You 3 men have not given an adequate answer." You're right, Don. They were thoroughly inadequate. So I surmise that it's because he used Elihu to prepare Job for God's discussion with him. Because it goes directly from chapter 37, the last words of Elihu, to 38, "Who is this that darkens counsel without knowledge?" Who are you giving counsel when you don't know what you're talking about? He says to Job. So I think it's to massage Job, to prepare him for the interaction with God himself. And that's all I'll say about it. I don't want to go on and on about it unless you want to do it privately or something, but there's a lot more that could be said.
That's that Job 38th chapter is really is so important in the timeline as the timeline is concerned, because people, you have to realize that the born again churches out there, they stand on that the earth was created in those 7 days, in the first 7 days, when Job plainly, I can remember listening to one of the program on this very fact, and I pointed out Job 30, and so then what did the minister say? who was making the presentation. Oh, he says that's only one theory. That wasn't a theory. That was from the Bible. Come on, you know. But they wouldn't let me. It was you had to call in, so they wouldn't accept another call by me. So I wanted to make that point, but never had a chance to. But it isn't that I didn't think about it. I sure thought about it. Yeah, that theory, the thing you call a theory is fact. It's factually out of the Bible, not a theory. Anyway, that's just one of the things that happened. Anyway, any other questions here?
David?
Yeah. Sorry, I came into this a bit late. I have something else, but what is it that you were saying about that as far as Book of Job having evidence of creation not being strictly in a 7-day window?
Well, it's obvious that God created the earth long before the first 7 days that we look at in Genesis. In fact, the whole universe was created. The sun was there. When you think about this, when you go back to that very first day, what does God do? He takes the vapor that's surrounding the earth. That's why the sun is not penetrating to the earth itself, because it can't get through the fog. And so, and we're not talking about a thickness of a cloud. We're talking about thousands of feet of vapor. And so what does God do? That's the first thing he does, is he collates the water and puts it, some of it in, you know, in the oceans and et cetera, et cetera. And so now the sun is capable of shining on the earth, which tells you that there was light on the earth then. It tells you that the sun had to be there already. It may not be in the exact correct relationship that God wanted it in, but the sun was shining on the earth. Does that help you any?
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with you, but I understand. But I understand where you're coming from with that now. But anyway, the reason I raised my hand was, well, like I said, I came into this later, so I'm not sure if you addressed this before, but wondering what your take on the stance that uh Satan isn't. I'm not aware of anywhere in the Bible where it says that Satan is God's adversary. It seems like it's always he's referred to as the adversary. And it seems almost as though his role is to be our adversary, to be the vessel by which we are tried. So it's just, I'm just wondering what your take on that kind of thing is.
Well, this is true. This is one of the areas that we are tried in, and because the whole world is running on his system of survival of the fittest, the whole world is running on that basis, and so you can see how it affects every one of us. And it affects us in the way that in order to survive, we're willing to do anything like Hitler did during World War II, and like Mussolini, and like Pol Pot, and you can think of a lot of other leaders, but it doesn't necessarily mean you got to remember that for those leaders to be able to accomplish those things, they had to have people under them that were willing to carry out his orders and do the same thing. To torture and kill people left and right. And so this is the system. I don't know if you're aware of how is Satan going to end up?
He is put away. His purpose is done at the end, and
Yes, his purpose is done, but what is going to happen to him? Is he going to just continue to float around, or
well, it says what is it, cast into darkness, I think. I don't have my Bible in front of me. I can't quite look it up.
But if you have an opportunity, read through Ezekiel 28 and you'll see what happens to him. What his end is.
Shigor.
Hi, Don.
Yes.
Satan's primary reason he is not able to touch Job because of the hedge. That's what he was saying. So if hedge is not there, could he have voluntarily attacked Job the way he attacked Job? He was able to attack physically once the hedge is taken off. My question is, does every human being on the face of the earth has hedge, or they don't have hedge?
I didn't understand that word. Did you say they didn't have rage, or what was that?
Hedge.
Did I miss what?
Some kind of fence or
Oh.
hedge?
Oh,
Yeah.
hate.
No,
Yeah.
hedge.
Oh, hedge. Okay. You got me. I'm missed something. Bill, can you tell me what the question is?
Yeah, does everybody have a hedge around them?
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. It's something that when I look at my life, I think, yeah, God must have a hedge around me because he's protected me. He's protected me from myself sometimes. That's what I think. But I believe that that the Father is taking an active participant in our lives, the ones that he's called and that have chosen to open the gate and follow his way, you see. And once we do that, now this is really to me an astonishing way of thinking. I mean, when you think you've got the creator of the entire universe personally taking a personal interest in each one of us, that is a powerful thing. We most of the time, I have to agree that I fail to remember that, and in my daily actions or what have you, we do you fly off the handle? Hopefully I've been able to put that more under control. You notice I don't say have it completely under control, but it's something that it's one of the things that I realize that's really a bad thing to be doing. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions about the presentation that was given, or comments about the presentation? Don's an early to bed kind of guy, and he's got to get up early tomorrow so he can get over to the Bible study.
Yep.
So,
I'm happy to take on the questions, but if we don't have any,
got one
I,
more here. Alan's
Oh.
got his hand up.
okay.
Oh, yeah, I just want to make a comment. It's not a question. I want to fill in with something that Peter says in 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. The Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. So this is a kind of a very good reference to what happened in the book of Job. Job was ultimately delivered out of his temptations, as it says in this verse. And he is then vindicated when he repents in dust and ashes. And he admits openly that he didn't have the answers and that now my eye finally sees him. So this is how God delivered Job. He took him down to the lowest level possible. Now, I don't know, and you don't know anyone who has gone from being so high to being so low. None of us know anybody who was taken through that dark tunnel that Job was taken through. But it says here, God knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations. And I think it helps us. It helps our spirit and our heart to remember that. And I loved your closing comments when you said that God has personally taken an interest in each one of us. And we should personalize that. He knows how to bring us through also and to deliver us out of ultimate temptations. So I want to say thank you again for bringing that to us and reminding us how important Job is to God and how important we are. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, Gloria?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you touched on it briefly about the brothers and the sisters eating wine and then Job doing sacrifices for them afterwards. It just struck me at the very end that he doesn't do that again for his other children at the end. Do you think that that's something that he learned? Is that something that we should do? How should we look at that kind of thing? I was wondering if you could expand on that any further.
Are you talking about the fact that he's saying he sacrifices for them because he's concerned about they may be thinking sinfully, right? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Or are you,
Yes.
what?
Well, yes, but yes, that what he does there, is that something that we see anywhere else in scripture as what a parent is supposed to do? Is that how we see great examples of how Job treated people later on and all of the wonderful things that he did. And so I was wondering if you could expand on more what he did for the children, if that was something that was that a good thing or was it not? Just
Well,
wondering.
first of all, as you know, we had a good number of children, and to this day, as a mother and a father, these people are grown. They got their own families, and we still have that concern about that special concern because they're our son or our daughter, right? And I think this is what you're looking at. Job has a concern about his grown children here. And in the beginning, where I read that, he has a concern about them, rightfully, rightfully or wrongly. When I'm counseling with people, that are talking about in particular about a grown son or daughter, and I have to remind them, wait a minute, they're grown-ups. They have a mind of their own. They have to stand on their own 2 feet. You can't stand for them. You got Job trying to stand for his children. Oh, I'll sacrifice for him. A lot of good that's doing them. Right? Think about that.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, once again, a question or comment about the presentation. Bill?
Well, we just was just discussed. Each one of his Job's sons on his day, they were having the party, and then when Job is knocked down, he says, "Cursed be my day, the day in where I was born." But the other thing that struck me about that, Don, I agree with you about trying to worry about your children. If Job understood the sacrifice as a picture of Christ sacrificing, you can't offer Christ for somebody else. They have to repent themselves. So it looked like that was what's going on, is he's trying to, maybe doesn't understand that sacrifice is Christ, but everybody has to sacrifice Christ as their own savior, not just what you said, Don. I'm done.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Don. And Don Roth, thank you very much for your study. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time. It's good to see that you're still speaking. And nice. And your testimony of you and Alice, that was really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that too.
Yeah.
A couple of thoughts here. I like verse 7, or actually we're at verse 8, where the Lord says to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" In other words, this establishes a pattern of his behavior. Satan's probably well aware of Job. If he is the most upright man on the earth, perfect and upright, one who fears God and eschews evil or puts it away, Satan knew who he was. That's pretty insightful for us to pick up here, that this wasn't a new thing. I also like to point out that this is probably a regular meeting God is having with in the spirit realm in heaven with his sons. We don't know how many spirit sons he has, but that's what I pick up from it. And to Gloria's point or question around him sacrificing for his sons and maybe their perceived sins, I don't know how that parlays to what we are as parents now, but the thought occurs to me that the fifth commandment tells us we must honor our father and mother, but we as parents do have, I think, the obligation to go to the throne of grace and claim their promise when they are honorable. And I find that I pray about my kids every day, probably a couple of times a day, just because they are precious and they are sanctified through us. So I find that a real important responsibility. That was my thought. Thanks.
David?
Yeah, I was just reading some background on Job. I don't know if this was addressed earlier because I was a little late coming in, but there seems to be some difference of opinion that Job being the first written work of the Bible, or the earliest thing. So, some people mentioned that it was earlier because there was no mention of Israel, and yet other opinions seem to express that it was written during the captivity or the return during the Persian period. But I was just wondering, I think Don probably holds on to the being even older than even Genesis as far as being a written work, but just wanted to know what his opinion on that was.
Well, as far Moses, it is the one that God used, I think, to write the book of Job. Now, there's nothing that I see in the book of Job that tells us who did the writing. But Moses makes, to me, makes the most sense because you're talking about a time element that fits with Moses. I mean, Moses, of course, wasn't alive at that time, but it occurred. The time element for Job occurred before Moses' birth, actually, but during, in other words, during what you would say the time that he would be writing about. See, he wrote the first 5 books. We agree with that. So if we agree with that, then if the time element fits in here where it should be, then of course he would be the author, or in other words, he would be the recorder. We should always keep that in mind when we're talking about books of the Bible. The book of John. John was the recorder. That's all. He got the words that he should be writing, and if that's what we believe inspired, then that's what we believe. And so therefore, in this particular case, you would have to ascribe the recording of the book of Job to Moses.
Perfect sense to me. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
John?
Yeah, in regards to Job offering sacrifices for his kids, I think that was before the priesthood. And but when the priesthood come, they offered sacrifices for Israel, for somebody else. They were, find in even in Leviticus 16:15, you shall kill the goat for the sin offering that is for the people. So he was offering their sacrifice for other people. So I just, what's your view on that, Don?
Well, the view is that was determined by God. He determined that that's what they would be doing. He did not determine this for Job. That was an undetermined point. This is something that Job, because of his consideration, I mean, he's concerned about. It's obvious he's concerned about his son and daughters, and so therefore he's going to sacrifice for them. And so in this is a detached sacrifice. It isn't something where now he gets them all together. Now look, this is what we should be doing, and explaining this. He doesn't do that, does he? He just does the sacrifice because just in case. See, it's just in case. Well, he's doing it. So the point is, this is a problem for Job.
Yeah, I see where you're going. That probably it might have been without their knowledge even.
Okay.
Well,
don't see any comments on YouTube. Monitoring the chat there, and there's nothing happening. I guess that would wrap it up then.
This is all recorded, right, Don? This is all recorded.
Yes, it's actually up there right now, and then we'll pull this copy down when we get the edited, cleaned up copy ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank everyone for their patience in listening to me. It's a more than a pleasure. It's I take it as a kind of like a badge of courage, you might say, or something like this, that I was able to speak to all of you. So it's bedtime for me, and it's been a pleasure being together with you and seeing how each and every one of you had different thoughts about Job and how things work out. So have a great evening and a great Sabbath.
You have a good Bible study tomorrow at the Powell's.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
Don.
Don.
Don Roth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Shabbat Shalom.